been a fan of Redacted audio for a while now, and although all of the characters are quite complex and interesting, none of them have caught my eye in quite the way Geordi and Cutie have. Both together and on their own, Geordi and Cutie are extremely complex and interesting characters who are both heavily flawed and, I think, doomed from the start. And I want to talk about it. I want to mention before we really get into this video that Geordi and, by proxy, Cutie are two characters from the Redacted universe that we have some of the least information and content for. We can all speculate why that may be, the fans, but whatever reason that may be, there's only a bit over 2 hours of public video content for Geordi and Cutie, and that may sound like a lot at first glance, but compared to almost any other character on the channel, that is nothing. So, when trying to analyze these two characters and their relationship, we have to take into context that we do, presumably, have very little of their story, and hopefully there will be more videos in the future to explain some of their quirks and get to know more about these characters. But anyway, back to the point. From the very beginning, Geordi and Cutie are shown to be very different people. Originally, the difference is just shown in their personality. However, as the videos progress, you also get to see how the difference of their characters impacts their outlook on things, and more importantly, their relationship. The best place for us to start is the first public iteration of the timeline. The video, Listening In on Your Crush's Thoughts, shows how Geordi and Cutie meet. And although I think there's some things that feel off about this video to me personally, this is a very good introductory video for the two characters. From the get-go, we get to hear from Geordi, and we get to see how scatterbrained and nervous he is. But if that wasn't enough, we get to hear his thoughts, too. Because Cutie is a telepath, obviously. And Geordi's thoughts are even more anxious and scatterbrained than his words. Geordi's immediate reaction to Cutie is to assume, or convince himself, that they couldn't be looking at him, and there's no way that this cute and hot person could be interested in him. Geordi is also shown to think a lot more than he talks. And yes, that is true for the average person, and I'm sure it's played up for the video, but it's an interesting point that does clearly play into the narrative of the story later, which I will touch on. Cutie, as contrast, although we obviously don't get to hear from them, appears to be much more confident and forward in their interest in Geordi. Cutie takes control of the situation and is in no way trying to hide their interest in Geordi. This will become a theme for the two characters. Geordi is a more reserved person, where Cutie is much more forward and outspoken. They literally are the "he asked for no pickles" meme, and we love that for them. Cutie and Geordi are both extremely flawed characters. Each of them have their own hang-ups and issues as people, and that heavily impacts their relationship. Some of the best examples of each of their own issues shining through is in the second video titled Telling Your Boyfriend That You Are a Telepath. In this video, there are two instances, one for each character, that show what I believe are the two biggest issues in Geordi and Cutie's relationship. We'll start with Geordi. I believe Geordi is stuck in his past relationship. Now, from what we've heard of his past relationship, this isn't necessarily his fault. However, Geordi, not only in this video, but in almost every video in his playlist, compares Cutie to his shitty ex, Ben.
Ugh, don't be needy. This is what Ben meant when he said it was too much.
And some may want to argue that he only does this because Cutie does start making Geordi uncomfortable and overstepping their boundaries and whatnot, but Geordi compares Cutie to Ben in this second video, before he knows they're a telepath. This isn't to minimize that Cutie is already listening into his thoughts without his permission, so technically Cutie, and by proxy us the viewers, shouldn't even know that Geordi is comparing them to Ben, but it's still a thing that happens, because telepath. And it would certainly hurt my feelings and make me anxious if I knew my partner thought I was like their shitty ex before I had done anything wrong. Or at least anything wrong that Geordi knows about. And again, we do know that Geordi thinks a lot more than he talks, which means Cutie knows. When you know what people are thinking, but know they're not even saying half of it to your face, wouldn't that make you anxious? Which leads me into my next point. Cutie's biggest flaw is being extremely distrusting. This, I think, is shown time and time again throughout the series, but my favorite moment is in the second video when Cutie and Geordi discuss the fact that Cutie heard Geordi think that he loves them.
Fuck. Wait. No. It's not that. It's not that I don't want you to know that.
We obviously don't get to hear exactly what Cutie says because they're the listener character, but we can infer by Geordi's response that they said something along the lines of, "Was I not meant to know?" or "Did you not want to tell me?" implying that they are anxious and even upset at the thought that Geordi is trying to keep that he loves them from them. Their insecurities are on full display in this moment, and with how nervous Geordi's response is, I think it's safe to say that Cutie's own insecurities and the way they show them are heavily fueling Geordi's. And I would like to remind you that this is early on in their relationship. Yes, the two have been dating for around 8 months at this point, but no matter how you define a long time in a relationship, we can all agree that the events of this discussion take place around the time the two of them, or at least Cutie, start to take the relationship seriously, while still being early enough in their relationship to still be in that "it's okay for you to not know a few things about me" phase. And it's shown in other videos of other relationships that when you reveal to your unempowered partner that you are empowered, that it's typically when the relationship becomes more serious. Now, obviously, this is assuming that Cutie feels the same about this thing as other characters, but I think due to how seriously they make this conversation sound, it would imply that they also thought this was a big deal in their relationship. Geordi certainly thought so, based on comments about trust he made in the video. It was also an important enough moment for Geordi and Cutie's relationship for Eric to make it a video. And that is really what matters. Eric decides that this was an important moment for them, whether they, Cutie and Geordi, thought it was in the moment. This video is the first instance that we see each of their own issues sewing through, but it certainly is not the last, and it can only get worse from here. The next video in the series is listening in on your boyfriend's thoughts. The issues in their relationship really began to form in this video. And in this video, Cutie is caught listening in on Geordi's thoughts without his permission. Geordi is reasonably uncomfortable by this, and they both get into an argument. My main takeaway from this video is that the two of them need to communicate better, mostly Geordi, and that Cutie is autistic. Now, that last point is not confirmed, and it probably never will be, considering that Cutie's character is supposed to be a listener character, so I will not be using it as much as proof, and I will instead be focusing on their actions and not the diagnosis they may or may not have. However, I do think if you start to think of Cutie as an autistic character, like most autistic people in the fandom do, you begin to see them as a lot less malicious and a lot more like someone genuinely struggling with social cues and boundaries. This potential diagnosis will never excuse their actions, however, I do think it would explain them quite a bit. Back on topic, though, the disaster couple's lack of communication. Again, I do feel that this lack of communication is mostly on Geordi, and I do think that a lot of their issues, not the main one, but a lot of their issues, could be avoided if Geordi actually just spoke up for himself and talked to Cutie. The issue in this particular video is that Geordi doesn't like Cutie reading his thoughts without his permission, but he has never mentioned it to them before this. This is the first instance Geordi is mentioning this boundary to Cutie, and he's basically blowing up on them. And from what we've heard throughout the video, this argument is more one-sided. Cutie spends most of this video listening to Geordi, and what we can infer as their response are not them being like, "I don't want to respect your boundaries," it's just genuine questions and concerns they have. I'm not saying Geordi is in the wrong for setting this boundary. He is absolutely allowed and encouraged to have boundaries and set them in his own relationship, but I think the way he handled this is very telling of his biggest problem, and that is he doesn't know how to properly communicate his wants and feelings. Geordi was actively bottling up this issue, and although there's no way to confirm what has been going on in their relationship between the previous video and this one, it's never stated that they've had any conversation like this before, or that Cutie could have known that Geordi felt this way, considering Geordi even says,
But I also haven't said all this before. We haven't had this argument before.
I think that I should also mention that this is 9 months after Cutie told Geordi about their powers. He has had 9 months to tell them about this personal boundary, and it's pretty implied by how emotional his reaction to this is that Geordi feels strongly about this issue. You don't get feelings like that overnight. This has been an issue before this point. Geordi just hasn't talked about it. There's another big instance of Geordi bottling up his feelings and refusing to even think about them when Cutie can hear, that I will touch on when I get to that video. But although Cutie did make Geordi uncomfortable, and they should try to do better in the future, which they said they'll do in this video, but we all know how that went, it's still on Geordi to communicate with them. They may be a mind reader, but there's still only so much that can do. I'm going to skip over the next audio, mostly because it's honestly just a cute, fluffy video. However, one thing that should be said about this video is that it does show that there was some progress that was made in the respecting Geordi's boundaries front. Cutie is shown to stop listening in on Geordi's thoughts in this audio when he asks to go private, and then only starts listening in again when Geordi says it's okay. They also don't push the issue. I'd like to think this was an intentional move on Eric's part to show that they really were trying to be a good partner to Geordi, despite what happens later on. Clearly, I am the #1 Cutie defender. Most people may think that the next video is one of the least relevant in the downfall of Geordi and Cutie's relationship, but I disagree. I think this audio has the best display of the root of Cutie's issues. It's not their main problem that I've been dancing around, and I promise I will get to that soon, but I do think this video has the root of what causes their issue. In this video, Geordi is comforting Cutie because of the inversion, but that's not what I want to focus on. I want to focus on the fact that Cutie was adamant on listening to Geordi's thoughts while they discussed and received comfort. This would seem to imply that Cutie finds a great deal of comfort and security in being able to listen to Geordi's thoughts. I personally think it's more than that. I think that Cutie finds great comfort in being able to listen to anyone and everyone's thoughts, but the only thing close to proof we get on that is in the video after this one, where they do canonically listen to other people's thoughts without second thought, and do bring it up as if it's supposed to be a good thing, but we'll touch more on that video later. Cutie does find comfort in listening to Geordi's thoughts. In a moment where they are clearly upset, their first thought is, I want to hear Geordi's thoughts. That doesn't sound like an issue at first, until you take into account that not being able to listen to Geordi's thoughts has the opposite effect on them. We don't see it in this video, but it's clearly presented that when Cutie can't listen to Geordi's thoughts, they become anxious and worried. Their worry is about what might or might not be being kept from them, which is a valid concern, one I'm sure most people have. But what this anxiety leads Cutie to doing is much too far. But this video is an excellent insight into how Cutie views listening to other people's thoughts, specifically Geordi's thoughts, and it really does make me wonder what would have happened if Geordi had told them not to listen in on his thoughts in that moment. I certainly can't see it going well if he had. But this is their main problem. Cutie finds a lot of comfort in hearing exactly what's going on in other people's heads. It helps their anxiety, yes, but it's also to the point where they basically can't function without listening to others' thoughts. This is pure speculation that I hope we will get some sort of confirmation in the future, but I believe it's safe to assume that Cutie has always been around people that didn't care if they read their thoughts, or at the very least, they never bothered to ask how the other people felt about it. They may have grown up in an empowered household, perhaps surrounded by other telepaths, or at least other empowereds that could tell when Cutie was reading their mind, and could do something other than just say don't do that as a response. And was probably surrounded by mostly empowered people throughout their life. Geordi is presumably the first person that isn't empowered that Cutie has told about their powers, and by proxy, is the only one who's ever gotten a say in if it's okay for them to be listening in on his thoughts. And although I think it's clear that Cutie is trying to respect Geordi's boundaries, their best was not enough in the long run. Cutie is overrun by anxieties, and all I can say is, Cutie, go to therapy. I'm sure Cam would love to have you. The next video just solidifies both of my previous points. In this audio, Cutie and Geordi are attending a pool party. Geordi, being the anxious guy he is very uncomfortable at this party, and Cutie is trying to comfort them. I say that kind of loosely, because although I genuinely think Cutie is trying to help Geordi be less anxious in this situation, their methods are unconventional, and honestly don't do much. An A for effort, but they certainly could have handled the whole thing differently. What I really want to focus on in this audio is one small interaction the two of them have. Geordi is talking about how he's worried about what Cutie's friends might think of them kissing, and Cutie says something along the lines of, "I can promise you they don't care." That implies that they listened in on the other party goers' thoughts, and can accurately confirm that they aren't bothered by the two of them. Geordi responds with,
I appreciate that. I'm glad you can confirm that they don't care that we kissed, but that's not really what Oh, fuck. Oh, God, I'm soaked now.
This quote is really interesting to me because this situation was apparently very important to Geordi, seeing as he brings up the instance later on in the videos I've yet to cover. But he, again, does not let himself say it or even think it in the presence of Cutie, proving that Geordi really is keeping his thoughts, mostly negative ones, to himself until it builds up in him so much that he explodes. This audio also shows again how Cutie views reading people's thoughts, and shows very well how different their opinion on reading other people's thoughts is to Geordi. They find no problem in just popping into other people's private thoughts, and although I guess the reason they did it was to try and comfort Geordi, they still weren't even fazed with the act of doing it. They did it without question or hesitation, which I do think proves that not only reading people's thoughts comes natural to them, but it does bring them a great deal of comfort, considering this was their way of trying to bring Geordi comfort. It's just another audio that seems like it's the two of them having a happy fun time, but when actually looking into it, especially with the context of the later videos, it shows how unhealthy their relationship has always been. These next two videos are a doozy, and I personally hate them. Not because Eric did a bad job on them or anything, the exact opposite, actually. Eric did an amazing job on these two audios, and because of that fact, they make me cry. Every time. But we're going to talk about them anyway, because I like pain, I guess. These videos are titled, "Your Boyfriend Asks for Your Trust," and "Your Boyfriend Finally Draws the Line," respectively. You remember when I mentioned how I didn't think it would go well for Geordi if he ever told Cutie not to listen in on his thoughts when they are already feeling anxious or insecure? Yeah, this video confirms that. In this video, Cutie comes home from work, and Geordi is there to greet them. Geordi admits that he's had a frustrating day, and it is implied later on that he has something on his mind. I couldn't pick up on the implications of this in the very beginning, but maybe Cutie could, so that's what leads them into the next part of the video. Cutie asks to read his thoughts, and Geordi says no. Cutie then begins to push Geordi to let them listen in anyway, which leads to an argument. Again, I think mostly on Geordi's part. I do wonder, in any type of audio roleplay video, how much of the storytelling gets pushed onto one character because they are the official character and not the listener character. And in this video, I do think it would involve more of Cutie arguing back and pushing back against Geordi if they were a character with a voice and not a listener character. So when discussing this video, I do tend to put more of the blame onto Geordi for it turning into an argument and not being a discussion. I do recognize that may be wrong in the grand scheme of things, and perhaps it was just how Eric had to make the video due to Cutie being a character without a voice, but I think the points I make are still true even if it's on a lesser scale. However, my earlier point about Geordi's lack of communication rings very true in this video as well. Even in a moment when Geordi is communicating his feelings to Cutie, he isn't giving them what they think is the full picture, which is obviously not true. Geordi says it best.
I know you're the kind of person that thinks it's always best to know everything all the time. The good and the bad. Not knowing hurts you because you've gotten used to knowing. I get that.
Which is basically what I've been saying about Cutie this whole time. Thank you, Geordi, for taking my thunder. Geordi does have something on his mind that he wants privacy to think through on his own. I'm not trying to say that he doesn't deserve his privacy. He does. However, he admits to knowing how Cutie is, and this is probably something he realized about Cutie a long time ago, and he's just never brought it up before now? And even in the moment, he is keeping whatever's on his brain to himself. To Cutie, I imagine that feels like a personal attack, which is not the way a person with good mental health or no trust issues would respond to something like that, but I digress. Do you remember how I mentioned that Cutie reading the minds of the guests at the party they went to previously was a bigger deal to Geordi than he let on? Well, he brings it up in this video. And what he says makes me wonder if we're missing something from the series, or if Geordi is just straight up lying. Because Geordi says that to Cutie, the problem is fixed, and that they blew right past it. But Geordi didn't try to bring it up after they got splashed. And that was the video we see before this, so presumably, until now, Geordi has not brought it up. Geordi also says that he keeps trying to tell them that what fixes something for them doesn't fix it for him. And again, it makes me wonder if we're missing stuff from their series, or if Geordi is just assuming Cutie should know these things, even though he's never mentioned them. If it's the latter, I think we can all agree that Geordi is clearly not communicating well with Cutie. But if it's the former, I wonder why Eric has never explored it before. Perhaps it has something to do with the way the series has been received by fans, or maybe it was just something he never thought of. I do doubt that Eric has never thought of it before. I mean, I see no reason for him to bring it up in this video if he didn't have a reason for it, or at least didn't know the full picture himself. After their argument, they both take some time and space, but then right before they go to sleep, Cutie reads Geordi's thoughts after he explicitly asks them not to. Before I talk about Cutie, I actually want to talk about the next and most recent video in their series. This video is where Geordi finally draws the line, but I, again, am left wondering where all of this is coming from. Geordi says that this has happened over and over again, and that Cutie's words aren't enough anymore, but when has Cutie ever overstepped a boundary like this before the video right before this, and in their timeline, the night before? To my knowledge, and from what I've read on the timeline and what I've seen from the videos, and even what little bit I've heard of Eric talking about these two on live streams, I have never seen Cutie overstep like they did in the previous video. And there was only ever one time we ever even hear these two have a discussion about this type of thing. It makes me wonder how much of this video, and by proxy their breakup, is because Geordi has communication issues, and how much of it is just us not seeing enough of these two characters. I'm hopeful that it's the latter, but based off of what I've seen from the audios, I'm not so sure. I genuinely do think Geordi has more issues than is being presented in these videos. Not nearly as many as Cutie, but issues that genuinely hindered their relationship and ultimately led to their messy end. Now let's talk about Cutie. After saying all that stuff, I want to start out by saying Cutie is 1000% in the wrong. Breaking Geordi's boundaries like that and effectively taking advantage of his trust in them was wrong, and no matter how much I've been defending them in this video, I will never think that they're in the right. Cutie's main issue has always been their trust in other people, or lack of trust in other people, and that trust issue stems from a place of anxiety. Cutie doesn't like not knowing what others think, both of them and in general. This leads to them thinking all of their and Geordi's problems can be solved through their powers. Geordi doesn't feel this way, and Cutie can't understand that. I don't think they're butting heads with Geordi about this topic of them not understanding where he's coming from, not only in their current situation, but any past issues they've had as well, comes from a place of ill intent. I don't think they're being purposefully ignorant to Geordi's issues, but Cutie just has such a wildly different worldview than Geordi because of their powers, and presumably because of their past, that they don't understand, genuinely. They are, however, choosing not to get help on these issues. Cutie should be able to accept that people want to be alone in their own heads, and they can't seem to do that because of their own feelings on reading people's minds. Cutie should be actively challenging these issues in themselves, but because of their telepathy, they think they don't have to. If Cutie wasn't a telepath, they would have had to deal with their anxieties and trust issues much sooner, because they can't just listen into someone's thoughts to know what they're thinking, and potentially hiding from them. But because they're a telepath, they do solve all of their issues through telepathy. And that causes issues with Geordi. In the final video, Geordi says something about Cutie that is actually news to the listener, but I think it's something that gives a lot of context to their previous actions.
I know you're not comfortable at the thought of opening up about any of this stuff. You barely even talk to me about it.
Cutie doesn't talk about their trust issues and insecurities with even Geordi. What Geordi says after that is also interesting, and I think gives us a hint, again, at why Cutie may be the way that they are. Geordi kind of implies that Cutie may have been in a bad situation in the past that made them this way, and compares their feelings about opening up to people with how he felt about things after what happened with him when he was in a relationship with Ben. It is certainly not a new thought that Cutie may have so many trust issues due to a past relationship or something of the sort, and I know I have been implying that my personal thoughts on the issue is that they most definitely are the way that they are because of something that happened in the past. But it's interesting to kind of hear Geordi alluding to the fact that maybe there was something big that made Cutie this way. At the end of the day, Cutie overstepped a boundary. Whether it was just this one time, or many other times before, they are the ultimate reason why their relationship with Geordi ended. And the sweet guy can't even be mad at them. He literally just wants them to get help for themselves, which they could definitely use if this section of the video is any indicator. So, now that we've gone through basically every video in their series, what do I have to say? To keep it as short as I can, they were destined to fail from the beginning. We can see from the second video in their series, even some of the first video in their series, that Geordi and Cutie have had these issues that led to their breakup from the beginning. And I think that's what makes their series so sad to me. They, against all odds, became a couple, and they wanted to be good for each other so badly, but ultimately their issues and how different they viewed things, which was their main issue, led them to their end before they could really thrive. I will say, though, they lasted for 3 years, and considering how negatively Geordi talks about their relationship in the last video, I'm surprised they lasted that long. Geordi's problems with communication and Cutie's trust issues and insecurities broke the two of them apart and led to their breakup. Their issues started well before they even got together and have only grown worse in their time since then. But who knows, maybe Cutie will get help, and hopefully Geordi too, and the two of them can come back together and be the power couple I always hoped they could be. Maybe love can conquer all. But they're toxic as fuck, so,